This is my best idea yet.
Wanna come out where I can see you, Charles?
Damn it! How'd they find me?
I'm practically invisible!
Hello viewers, and welcome to the Craft Mask, home of custom action figures and toys. I am your totally inconspicuous host, Charlie, and tonight is a 2-for-1 special as I tear apart a bunch of G.I. Joes to put back together as my two favorite characters from my favorite video game franchise, Metal Gear Solid 3. For those who don't know, Metal Gear is a story about the Metal Gear.
Metal Gear.
A walking tank.
A bipedal tank.
Able to launch stealthy nukes.
A nuclear weapon.
And all the stealthy people who try to build them, stop people from building them, steal them so they can use them to stop people from stealing or building them, or not stealing it.
Psycho Mantis.
It's complicated. That is to say, this series is deeply political.
Even if they are our enemies, they're still our countrymen.
Profoundly philosophical, and utterly stupid. That's why I love it. Because it's just like me.
It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Despite the plot being mostly about some troublesome vehicles, the real meat of the story lies with the troubled vehicles of the plot, aka the characters.
What the hell are you talking about?
On one hand, we have codename Snake, a CIA agent sent to 1960s Soviet Russia to sabotage the very first Metal Gear.
Metal Gear.
But the mission goes sideways quickly when his mentor, codenamed The Boss, steals some nukes, defects to Russia, and kicks Snake's lily ass. Now Snake has to survive the wilderness empty-handed, sabotage the Metal Gear, retrieve the nukes, and kill the boss, and all her Tier 3 subs, unless he takes the blame for the whole botched operation. Snake's not having a good day. Ah! But on the other hand,
My hand!
A man who seems like he's having too much fun, codenamed Ocelot.
That's Major Ocelot to you. And don't you forget it.
Huh?
A cocky young Russian special operative, Ocelot becomes a recurring problem for Snake, even across multiple games, and eventually becomes an ally. And then not again. And then again. And then not again. It's complicated. Now that we've introduced the stars of the show, let's get on with it.
Enough of this.
But there is one last thing. The pile of figures you see here are all part of a Metal Gear Big Batch project. 6 custom action figures in all. And I'll be releasing them all in paired videos like this one. Why? Because scripts for some of them alone were emaciated, so they have to share a double feature. Starting with Snake and Ocelot. Want to know who'll be paired with who in the future vids? I don't know if it's the bad temperature control in the warehouses or if the toys at Ross are all pulled from batches that failed quality inspection. But they are always coming to me with outrageously tight joints. After heating this one shoulder and getting nowhere, I had no choice but to chop it up. Turns out that the shoulder and his knee were fused together. So I ran a screw through the side. I flattened the head on the second screw embedded into the calf, doing a few rough cuts, and then pressing the parts together to get a perfect fit. I did all this because the two halves of the leg wouldn't stay together with just glue. Or to be more specific, the glue that I had. Vinyl solvent would have worked wonders here, but I didn't have any.
I have to find my own weapons and equipment? Whose crazy idea was this anyway?
The other seams were sealed using heat, but this is just to prep the surface for detailing later. A weld on the very outside like this couldn't be relied on to hold the leg together. Change of plans. This guy, what is all of this? It's like a jumpsuit. I thought it was a regular button-up shirt, so I won't be using this torso anymore. But I will use these arms. But using these hands, because they grip those revolvers from the Spawn toy way better. I guess I'm taking his torso, because that's definitely the same one as this one, and that's closer than the other. But his legs, this body, these arms, yeah. Ah, and how young and naive I was back then. But my simple part-swapping dream was crushed. The pegs in the wrist were such vastly different lengths that no simple mod could bridge that gap. So yeah, all of what I just said before, forget it, ignore it. I had to go back to just swapping arms. Even going back to Plan A though, I got shafted. The heat gun wasn't able to soften up the shoulder socket enough to release the arm, so I figured I'd just dunk the figure in some hot water instead.
Industry standard, pretty much.
That took a bit of time, but for all my patience and caution, I was rewarded with more broken parts. Imbeciles. Jesus. What it gonna take to get this thing out of this solid piece of shit? Look at this. Suck my bitch. I didn't have a good enough grasp on the socket, so when I tried to pop his arm out, the softened shoulder socket peg ripped. To fix it, I just had to hollow out where the peg used to be and glue in a tiny length of aluminum rod. I even used the teeth of these pliers to scuff the rod for a better grip on the glue. Not very difficult, but that was the last straw. At that point, I gave up playing nice and just went straight to cracking open the torsos. Because f it!
Do it live!
To crack a torso, you just cut along the seam and then jam progressively bigger stuff in there until they force the torso apart, while also trying not to damage the internals.
Oh my.
Easier to do without a vest and straps in the way, but also some amount of damage is unavoidable even under the best circumstances. I just try to make peace with the brute force method here. It's destructive, yes, but it's the sort of damage more easily fixed, in my opinion. Better the devil you know. Now, what the devil is going on with the necks? Snake's neck was too thick for its new body, and I couldn't just swap the heads because their ball joints and base plates were all slightly different sizes. So cue cutting, drilling, and filing. I wish I could have swapped necks straight up, because Snake isn't all that old, or that buff at the start of the franchise, so I had to buff out the wrinkles on his oversized head stump. I didn't lose all faith, though. I had a sneaking suspicion that Ocelot's donor parts were compatible, and I was right for a change. Excellent.
Glorious!
Also, ironic, honestly, if anyone has their head screwed on right, it's not Ocelot. I still had to make a bunch of additional cuts to both necks and collars, but not to get them to fit. Oh no. It's baffling to me how the standard G.I. Joe would be capable of so much more articulation if not for a few excessive pieces of plastic. What is Hasbro playing at? Maybe the inbox collectors don't care, but what about the rest of us? And it wasn't just the necks. I cut a bunch of stuff for no other reason than to allow them to move.
My hand!
You know, allowing the figure to perform some action. At least it's way easier to part the halves of the hip, which I had to do because the ball joints for the thighs were also 1/1000th of a nanometer different and didn't fit the swapped legs. Why, of all the parts they could standardize, would these things not be? What should have been a simple part swap got sidetracked by incompatibility and repairs. Snake's hands were actually an easy swap. So, why can't they all be easy, Hasbro?
Why?
The peg on the shoulder is so goddamn long that it pokes through to this side, and this space here isn't big enough. Look. So this guy's shoulders would have never been able to move back and forth anyway. Madness.
No! madness!
Why are internal parts not standardized? Obviously, I don't expect them to make toys with modifiers in mind, but how does that even make sense? From a production standpoint, every new size piece is a separate die you have to cut. It costs thousands of dollars to cut an injection molding die for unique parts, and then somehow you'll end up with a figure that can't even move. What the f***?
I push my fingers into my veins.
Okay, hang on. I need to remind myself of something. Just quick. Promise, it'll be quick. With all the major parts chosen and in place, I sealed the torsos back up. While it might not work for his limbs, what with all the torsion and stretching they experience, heat welding works great on the hard plastic parts, provided that both sides of the welded area get enough heat to temporarily liquefy. I used some nails and sandpaper to sand in between the folds of the clothes, but I didn't get too fine on it because I knew I'd be back here later to sculpt over the area with epoxy and to cover up the factory seams.
Is there a way to take off my pants?
Say what?
So I got into an argument with myself whether to leave Snake's pants as is or put in the disproportionate effort to bring them closer to the source. The thing about arguing with yourself, you always lose. But that burlap texture gave me the ick. I needed it gone. Now, Snake's right knee has a rubber compression band on it, so I used that area to experiment with different ways to smooth out his pants. Once again, vinyl solvent would have worked wonders here, but holy sh**. In the end, I made some custom rotary bits to gently rub off all that texture. I built it, and even I can't believe that jank actually worked. Heck. Cool. Then I had to extend the pant leg with 2 small sheets of PLA. This is what it looks like on the other side.
Brother,
I'm gonna have to remember this. That could come in handy. And smooth the transition with glue and epoxy, because vinyl and PLA don't heat bond well at all. I had to thin out his calves too to allow his foot to move within the confines of his new pants, and for some reason I got really invested in preserving his laces. And very upset when I couldn't. Call me JoJo, because those shoes got me emotional. Speaking of hurt and anger-inducing losses, it took hours of back and forth with sanding, acetone softening, and rubbing just to get these pants smooth. All because I refused to pay the overinflated price for the literal perfect base figure for this project. Was any of that worth it?
What are we, stupid?
I'm having some trouble keeping this guy's pants on. Every time it goes back here, it squeaks and it wants to pop off. And as everyone knows, squeaky ass gets the drill bit.
Colonel, I'm trying to sneak around, but I'm dummy thick, and the clap of my ass cheeks keeps alerting the guards.
Well, I heard of brass balls, but never brass holes. There you go. Now, while I could have just left Snake's pants as their factory default, I knew Ocelot's pants needed full commitment resurfacing. So, in a way, whatever went wrong didn't seem so bad. I was expecting it. Such is the power of pessimism. Ocelot's dressed in a style of horse riding pants, and for some reason their geometry confounded me. I had to slap on some hot glue so I could tweak the exact shape as much as I needed until it started looking right to me. Which is just as well, because it really didn't for the longest time. I even went back and tweaked the shape of the pants after I'd put on the supposed final layer of epoxy. It's a fine line between perfectionism and OCD. At some point the AC cut out and the temperature crept past 90 degrees, so I had about 5 minutes to get out of the workshop before I died. But before then, I took advantage of the fact that I didn't need water to smooth out the epoxy anymore, on account of my profusely sweaty palms. The joys of the New Mexico summer. Now, Ocelot's legs and feet flexed a bunch when moved, but I only noticed that when the epoxy on his legs started cracking. I could patch up the epoxy with more flexible variants of Sculpting stuff, but for his spurs I had to change plans entirely and use sheet metal to fight the flex. I made it harder for myself by using steel sheet instead of aluminum, but I couldn't find mine. And I'm not buying more so long as I know I have some lurking somewhere. And I made it yet harder by not drilling the holes before I cut the sheet. So much so that I just gave up on making proper spurs and gave him some vaguely spur-shaped spikes. It's not like this detail really warrants the effort anyway. He's been dressed like a cowboy for more than 30 years, and the douchebag only ever rode one horse in the entire series. What are we doing here? Despite the confusing triangle pants and noodle legs, I would have said things were actually going pretty smoothly. Too smoothly. I should have known something was bound to happen. Just like in the game, my fun with Ocelot was interrupted by
The pain!
Oh, where are my tweezers? Where are they? How the hell did that happen? Oh, you son of a ah. Oh. Okay, all work. Going to stop momentarily while I tear my drawers apart. That's the culprit right there, this edge. And now this entire drawer is gonna suffer from I don't know what. It just keeps getting worse. Anyone who's seen the Tuska video knows I'm pretty used to getting chopped up, but a splinter under the nail. Well, that's where I draw the line. Don't know how much fucking lead paint, unstable fucking varnish. This thing's old as crap. I don't care. I just don't want this to happen again. Back to the void, you demon. Well, with the legs stable enough to grip onto, I started work on the harnesses, belts, seam repairs, and other body details. I roughed up parts of the body to make a better surface for the tiny strips of Sculpting stuff and or epoxy to stick to, and I sculpted them as finely as I could within the time limit. Whether it's Sculpting stuff or epoxy, all in the early phases, like the first 20 minutes. This crap just wants to stick to everything, except the stuff you want it to stick to. But didn't worry too much about accuracy since I could neaten them up after with carving and sanding. Pretty standard stuff. Anyway, it was the overlapping shirt parts that filled me the most with
the fear! The fear!
Ooh. I don't know if I like the sound of that. Filled me most with... I was filled... No. The fear... No. No. Well, okay, maybe.
It's already getting weird.
Since these figures are overwhelmingly made out of hard materials, I really didn't want to make just one portion of their shirts out of fabric. It would look way too out of place. So I did my best to fake the overlapping shirts. For Snake, it was a matter of sculpting as sharp a straight line as I could, right where his hip socket is. And I made his buckles near the crotch out of actual metal wires, so they'd stand up to the abuse of the legs rubbing up against them. Actually, raw aluminum wire came in clutch for Snake's whole body and even some of his weapons. It's times like these I really miss Radio Shack. They were a bastion for us low-level nerds. Without a thing to look at and hold, I couldn't find any rubber-coated wire small and flexible enough to fake all of his communications gear and the wrapping on his knife. Which is very unfortunate because these ones have no flex, so they can't connect like they do in real life. Like this one that makes up his earpiece pretty much is tucked under his chin and gets nowhere near the actual radio box thing. It has been a long night. Just great, now I got a finger stuck together. Anyway, Ocelot doesn't need as much articulation as Snake, so I got away with a slightly longer shirt and faked its length a little bit more by putting his belt further up on his body. I still cracked and repaired his shirt something like 3 times while testing poses. This was really pushing the limits of this material. As I was making space for his knife to sit on his chest, I got a rare glimpse of just how thin the sculpted stuff can get. Speaking of belts, Snake's belt is loaded up with pouches and attachments, which I made mostly from remolded pouches from other figures, and the occasional block of balsa wood covered in sculpted stuff. But they kinda broke off when I tried to move his torso, so I went back and sanded the inside of the pouches and the figure's waistline with extreme prejudice. It left a hell of a mess on the inside, but at least it's decently covered up. Unlike the prejudice that's just out in the open these days.
Sad. So sad.
Oh, now for everyone who doesn't like politics in their entertainment, don't worry, just be patient. Eventually they'll feed all the taqueros to the gators, and between that and my red 40 allergy, I'll starve to death in no time. So no more craft mask. And won't that just make America great again? I mean, I'd prefer we all got politically engaged and fought for our rights, as opposed to just laying down and dying. But I can't arm a nation alone. Just these 2 plastic dudes. And to do that, I turned to 3D printing. It saved some cash, but man did it waste a lot of time. What should have been easy turned into a whole mission inside the virtual world.
Virtual mission?
See, I found some neat weapon replicas for free on the Purple site, but I discovered that their geometry was a mess, so I had to fix that. Then I had to modify them to stop these tiny little details from snapping off in a mild breeze. Still, a few parts broke off after printing, and I did what I could to fix them in real life, because it would take way too long to fix the STL and print the stuff yet again. However, for the sake of the common good, I did fix the STLs, and I've made all of the modified files available at the Craftmaster Patreon for free. Sort of. I don't know, this whole subscription thing is a gray area.
Gray box!
So anyway, the intense blendering broke my mouse wheel, and I had to suffer through several weeks of video editing without a wheel while replacement parts came in, and if I have to see another non-manifold geometry error message, I'm gonna wrap an HDMI cable around my neck and—
Using science to help mankind. It's just in the movies.
That's enough crying. Pull yourself together.
Before I actually got to sculpting on the close quarter details, I made a few Oyamaru molds. I'd rather make molds of these things than chop them all up, just in case I find a project suited to them as they are. Like this vest here. It's going on one of the other Metal Gear figures, so its bits will have to be copied.
I have a twin?
I could sculpt them from scratch too, and I do so when I really have to, like with that backpack. But I'm trying to get stuff done fast here. And it was pretty fast. Some epoxy was left overnight in the molds, and by the next day, it was all firm enough to remove, clean up, and stick to the body. Pretty simple, except when it came to the bullet belt. Yep, the saga of the belts took a turn, as the only bullets I could make a mold of were weirdly flat-faced, so I had to cast it, then round the ends, then make a mold of the casted piece, and then mold that off as well. Also, I could string a chain of impressions on a length of bakeable clay, because I didn't want to wait for 12 epoxy casts to cure just to find out that the molds were imperfect. With the polymer clay, I got it all done in one sitting, comprised of 4 attempts. They faced the wrong way! Yeah, take 3. The baked bullet impression was cleaned up and glued onto the figure, and the actual belt was sculpted around that. A little wonky up close, I know, but I'm counting on the paint job to hide all of the various sins we've committed in this project. I had to make that belt out of actual leather, because the way it overlaps multiple places with joints, it really requires some flex. I skipped gluing any bullets to his lower belt because I just knew they would never stay put. The holsters I got away with only because they sit at flat points on Ocelot's pretty
body.
Incidentally, I made the holsters from polymer clay because that's what I know how to do. But man, I really wish I had more leather know-how and tools, because the emaciated polymer clay threatens to crack continuously.
Your face might be a problem, so you just have to figure something out.
As you might have noticed, this guy's kinda beardy. I did trim his whiskers about as much as I could without making a mess, but I figure this is an acceptable look for a dude who's been stuck in the jungle for a while. Actually, I'm surprised the game doesn't include a beard growing mechanic like what they had in The Witcher 3. I mean, you can literally kill one of the bosses by procrastinating long enough that he dies of old age. So why not? I wished I had acetoned his beard though. The paint there was weirdly gummy and kept messing with the scalpel as I tried to trim it. I popped off his mop of scraggly hair and scored his scalp so I could sculpt some more snake-appropriate hair there. And that was a lot of alliteration for no reason. Snake's look was heavily inspired by legendary mullet-having characters like Snake Plissken and John Rambo, so the back of his hair remains.
He may be party in the back, but I'll make sure he's business in the front.
Now, the choice for Ocelot's face might seem counterintuitive, but bear with me. The one that looks much more like him is stuck with such a nothing emotion slapped on his face, and that hair, while close, isn't quite it. So there would be work to do regardless. We just gotta pop off that mop, shave down those jowls, and thin out that schnoz.
You know I love you.
Of course.
I'm not kidding, all right? I'm gonna take care of you, all right?
The one I went with doesn't look as much like him, but by God does he have the attitude. And you've got to understand, this guy tried to clown on and kill Snake when they first met, and Snake hit him with the and tells him, so he comes back with the revolver. So he runs away, and then the maniac comes back again with 2 revolvers. And this athletic little scamp just gets more eccentric as time goes on. So you know in your heart, this is the right face. My job as tiny soldier man stylist doesn't stop there. Ocelot needed a beret, and I sculpted that with polymer clay. A polymer clay beret, I say.
I must say.
And it stays on just barely with sticky tack because I forgot to put a magnet in his head while I was struggling with his hair. Oh well. I figured the hair would be the most challenging thing about this model.
I tried to tease it, but I just pissed it off.
On the other hand,
My hand!
nothing went wrong with Snake's hair, which leaves me with nothing to say. And I now realize that if I ever get good at this whole customizing thing, it'll be the end of the channel. So I'll just keep blaming everybody else and learn nothing. But now that Ocelot had a hat, Snake was feeling left out. So I made him the best hat in the game, the crocodile cap, and luckily, I have a pretty good crocodile figure I can just copy from. Actually, the creature Snake wears is an Indian gharial? Gharial?
Huh?
So I had to pinch the snoop.
The snoop?
That's why the mold was made abnormally thin for such a large piece. Back in the day when I first heard you could wear a crocodile head in the game, I got really amped.
And then I saw it. Oh, I feel nauseous.
So I'm making it the way I thought it would look. Not like some overpriced souvenir hat from a Florida theme park, but an actual crocodile skin sourced from the wild, worn raw, and still bloody, like a crazy jungle-bound person would do. With all the solid parts ready,
That is not solid!
it's on to painting. Sort of. Actually, before painting, I left Ocelot's body in a cup of synthetic dye and wrapped Snake's elbows and knee with a dye-soaked paper so their original colors wouldn't show through at the joints. Also, back when I was reattaching Snake's neck, I used some acetone to remove the red paint of his collar. I didn't want that red showing through from underneath either. Uh-oh. Texture pop-in fail.
Just going to ignore that.
And back to the current timeline. I sprayed on a primer, brushed in the base colors, and went back and forth dry brushing and washing, trying to avoid any harsh shadows or extreme highlights. Because the original game had a very soft, feathered look to it. It could have just been because of technical limitations at the time, but I actually think it was a stylistic choice, and one that holds up really well. I'm making no effort to keep up with the remaster's looks because it's just run-of-the-mill tech demo stuff. It's hyper-real now, but it'll lose its charm as soon as the next ultra-mega realistic graphics showcase game comes out, and I'm painting with something more iconic in mind.
Graphics are temporary, art direction is forever.
With that in mind, I left Snake's uniform the basic olive drab, because I didn't want to risk overcomplicating his paint job. With 3 clones, 2 stalkers, and the entire United States government hunting and trying to kill him, Snake's life is complicated enough. You know, I've discovered that these old brushes with the little curled tips are pretty good at painting around corners. I dabbed on some pastel dust to get an extra smooth finish in some places. The alternative to which is doing 1,000 paint layers so thin you can't even see them on camera. I swear to you, this is actually doing something. But with that, 2 legends are now ready to come back to life.
That was some fancy shooting. You're pretty good.
Pretty good. What's your name?
Snake.
No, not that name. You're not a snake, and I'm not an ocelot. We're men. Names.
Thank you all for watching, dear viewers. This is the end. I'll be back with more Metal Gear figures eventually, but Fallout and Warhammer might overtake them. If you're looking to get a sneak peek of all the upcoming things, consider becoming a patron. There's plenty extra stuff on the Craft Mask Patron, including Mask Off, the behind-the-scenes podcast, and those STLs I was talking about earlier. Otherwise, you can help and support the channel through the usual means by clicking buttons and saying words.
Lolly-loo-lay-low.
Now, my viewers, go forth and feast upon the frogs!
Okay, so there's this big pile of crap, right? It's shaped like a giant tank. Whatever it hits, people, trees, buildings, turns into shit. My hometown, my old school, my family, my girlfriend, old man John, everything in that turd's path turned into shit.